All right, it's confession time about literary blind spots. My literary blind spots are probably a lot bigger than I've realized, and maybe some of them I'm kind of embarrassed to admit. I don't know, maybe not. But, I've been reading seriously for quite a long time. I think ever since I was like a teenager. So longer than I'd care to admit. But somehow, there's a lot of books and authors that I've just never read. Sometimes I've just purposely avoided them. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about those and share some of them, and then maybe hear from some of you guys if you've avoided some of these authors or who the authors are that you've avoided or what your literary blind spots are. So today I'm going to talk about 5 of those authors. There's probably a lot more of these videos that I could put out. So the first one is a big guy that I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that I've never read, and that is Thomas Pynchon. I have never read a single Thomas Pynchon book. I got close last year to reading Inherent Vice because for some reason I got interested in the movie adaptation of it, which I still haven't seen. I haven't seen that either. And I'm a big fan of the Life on Books podcast, and those guys are always talking about Thomas Pynchon. I've just never gotten around to reading Thomas Pynchon. I'll have to confess one thing about Pynchon, and it applies to another author that I'll come to later in this list, is that, initially when I came across Pynchon, his books have just always been so massive. And I just kind of have a hard time with really big books, particularly really big books from authors that I've never read before. I always prefer to read shorter novels, novellas, or collections of short stories from new authors or authors that are new to me. So I can get an idea about their writing style and some of the themes that they write before I, dive into huge novels. Having said that, I just always kind of shy away from the big books. And maybe that's something that I need to kind of get over. I do have a copy of Lonesome Dove on my shelf back there. That's about 800 or 900 pages. And I keep thinking like that's probably a good wintertime read. So anyways, so the first one, Thomas Pynchon. If you're a fan of Pynchon, let me know, and let me know where is a good place to start. I'm not buying books right now, but that doesn't mean I can't put books on a list to be bought. So there you go. First one down. Second one, really embarrassed to say about this one, Jane Austen. Never read a single word by Jane Austen. In fact, I think the only title that I know for sure written by Jane Austen is Pride and Prejudice. Just never read it. I've never been interested in romances, and I've never been interested in writing from that period of time that she wrote in. And I'm also just not interested in stories set in that period of time. And I know I should read it because, there's not a lot of big female authors from, that period of time. Actually, even, to now, there's not a lot of women are still not generally recognized as authors. So I probably should read it. I don't know why. I just not interested in it. When I see her novels at bookshops and, online and stuff like that, I just am never compelled to buy it, but I probably should. Kind of embarrassed to say that one. So again, if you can recommend where I should start with Jane Austen, please feel free to leave a comment, maybe leave some tips and pointers of how to get into that. Maybe the writing style is something I shouldn't be intimidated by. I often find writing from the early 19th, or even from the early part of the 19th century, early 20th century, I just often find the prose style to just be dull and just hard to get into. Maybe that's very amateurish of me. Maybe I'm just not well educated or whatever, but I just find it difficult to get through. Even when I was assigned those readings from those periods in school, I always struggled with it and just didn't find it very interesting. And it was always, to me, it was always lacking a kind of, I don't know, just kind of lacking a certain kind of grit that I wanted. And it just always felt just very, very polished. And it makes sense because if you were writing in that period of time, you probably were very well educated and you were writing towards a very well educated audience. So that kind of makes sense. Admittedly, things in the 20th century kind of got dumbed down a little bit. So anyways, again, if you're a Jane Austen fan or you've kind of cracked Jane Austen, let me know what should I read? Maybe I'm not missing anything either. Let me know about that. Okay, so the next one is actually two people, and I'm probably just going to get roasted and taken to town all over BookTube on this one. But these are two authors that I really cannot make a distinction between, and they're both giants in the field. William Gaddis and William H. Gass. In my strange brain, they have been the same person for quite a long time. But I've become more familiar with who William H. Gass is through novels like The Tunnel and Middle Sea and things like that. And I know The Tunnel is considered like a great novel. Leaf by Leaf has put out some great content about it. The guys at Life on Books are big fans of The Tunnel and other William H. Gass books. Again, just never interested in it. And again, huge, massive books that I just find like it's hard for me to pick up something blindly and not know what it is, and also accept that there's going to be 900 pages of whatever that you just don't know what it's going to be. Having heard people describe it now more recently, I am much more interested in it. And I think he's an author that I'm definitely going to have to try to give a shot and get into. All right, so this next author, another giant in American writing, and probably a writer that I should write because I do lean more towards American authors, and that's John Irving. Never been interested or never felt compelled to read anything by him, largely because I associate him with my mom, and I just always think it's like a mom book. I remember there was a winter and even into a spring where she seemed to always be reading a John Irving novel that she would get from the library. And it was at a time when I was getting into reading, and, you know, at school, I was doing really well in lit classes and things like that. And she would always tell me like, oh, you should try John Irving. You should read John Irving. And even teachers would say like, oh yeah, you should really read John Irving. He's, you know, great author. Never did it. I don't know why. I can't explain it, but again, just another author that I just felt like sometimes when something is like suggested to you repeatedly, or when you hear about it so much, you just feel like you don't need to read it. I'm that way often with books and with movies, even with music. Like when people just say like, oh, this movie is great. You got to see it. You got to see it. You got to see it. It just gets talked about so much that I just feel like I don't need to see it because I've just heard so much about it. And I think that's the case with a lot of some of these writers. Okay, now this last one, again, really embarrassed. This is an author that I should definitely like, David Foster Wallace. I haven't read any of his books. I know I've read an essay or two, or maybe a couple of short stories that would have been maybe in like Esquire or GQ or something like that in the late 90s, early 2000s, which is kind of when I was getting back into, or it was a time when I was kind of into serious reading. And I know I should like his writing because he writes pretty good. He's known for writing commentary, social commentary about, you know, the US and kind of the ridiculousness and the absurdity of American life and American politics and American society. And I do like a lot of writers that tackle that, especially like Don DeLillo, White Noise, Underworld. I really like Don DeLillo. I don't know why. I do know why. I've never gotten into David Foster Wallace, and that's because I've looked at Infinite Jest many, many times, and that book is just massive and it's huge. And I've just felt like, again, another one of these guys where it's like, get an editor. What are you, Stephen King? I mean, Stephen King desperately needs an editor. And I'll probably, like I said, I'm going to get roasted on this stuff, and I'm not trying to give hot takes or be controversial. I'm just telling you my opinions. And I know these are literary blind spots. I know I should read Infinite Jest. I just haven't gotten around to it, just haven't felt compelled about it. And it's a book that gets talked about a lot, and it's a book that always kind of resurfaces. So obviously it's a good book and it's a really well-respected book. And even if it's something I'm not interested in, I should probably read it just so I know what other people are talking about. All right. So those, again, 5 massive literary blind spots that I have, putting it out there. No shame. little bit of shame, but I'll say no shame. So I haven't read those. I haven't read these authors. I haven't read anything by them. Sometimes that's just the way it is. Sometimes you just aren't interested in it. But like I said, if you want to take reading seriously, it's good to have read the classics. It's good to have read the giants in the field so that at least you know what people are talking about when these books do come up in conversation and when they do come up in kind of criticism and reviews and things like that. So if you have read these authors and you know where I should start, please leave some recommendations down below, not just for me, but for others too. And if you are also somebody who kind of avoids these authors, and like I said, it's partially because maybe the books are intimidating for some reason, or they're just like too colossal and too massive to take on, let me know. Maybe you're not alone there. In case you don't know, my name is Carl, and this has been Please Read Your Book.